Hello, beautiful Combabes. This is Natasha Josette. Natasha co-founded Momentum Kids in 2016, and she's one of the organizers of the World Transform Festival. We all know this festival. If you don't know, just ask and I'll give you like a little. But actually, you can hear about it in my last video with Sam Swan. Little link there. She creates or aims to create political spaces that are welcoming to people who are excluded or disenfranchised from politics. And she's amazing. Because you are a Black woman, but also a single mom and also involved in politics. You just have so much that we can learn from. And today we're going to talk about specifically
Momentum Kids.
Yay! What are we going to talk about with Momentum Kids?
Well, we're going to talk about why it came about. We're going to talk about some of the attacks that we had, because we were also very much slated for the idea of political education for children. A lot of people, I think we got called Tiny Trots, we got Minnie Mouse. I was even regularly trolled by someone who sent me photographs of Hitler Youth every day. So it was kind of like quite an intense time, considering it came out of something really beautiful and really hopeful. There was that element to it as well. There is a part of me that thinks if they don't want us to do it, we're onto something. So we're going to have a little conversation about that.
Yay! And we're also going to do this amazing little look, winged eyeliner, glowy face, dark lip, amazing for going out. And you're gonna go after this, right?
I'm gonna have to find somewhere. We'll be dancing on tables somewhere.
Just get some friends. Let's go. It's too good of an opportunity to miss. And we're gonna start right now. So, Natasha, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You are turning 40.
I am turning 40.
I cannot, your skin is just so flawless.
I'm actually quite terrified.
No! How can you be terrified when you look this good at 40?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to continue looking this good. That's kind of terrifying. I don't know, there's something really big about 40. It feels like 30 just felt really exciting, and 40 just feels terrifying because I'm suddenly thinking, okay, have I achieved everything I want to do?
And so
what am I doing with my life?
Oh, come on.
Do I get to have midlife crisis now?
You do.
A meltdown?
No, you do.
Can we do all that?
Well, because you're getting a tattoo, right?
Yeah.
Does that count?
Yeah, well, this is part of my ritual. I actually think we don't do enough rituals.
That is true.
I'm a big believer in rituals.
I agree.
It kind of appeals to my witchy side. And so I decided I'm kind of a bit obsessed with monkeys, which most people who spend time with me realise that I kind of retweet monkeys quite a bit. I actually genuinely follow monkey Twitter, which is...
It's a whole new vibe, isn't it?
It's a whole thing.
Monkey Twitter.
So I'm getting a monkey here, which I have already.
Ooh.
It's
oh
still
God,
it's actually at that stage where it's still scabbing over.
That is gorgeous. Can you show the camera?
Can I show the camera? I don't think I can.
So tell me a little bit, because you're 40 and you're a
Not
mom.
yet.
No, you're turning 40, sorry. You're turning 40 and you're a mum, but you're not the usual mum, don't you? You're really, really involved in politics, which is really inaccessible to most mums.
Yeah, although it is quite new, so it wasn't really until about 2015, 2016 that I got involved in politics. And there was this moment when the kids were really little and I was on my own with them and I was trying to get them ready for bed. And one was in the bath, not getting out of the bath, and one was literally running around the living room with her pyjamas half on, half off, trying to get away from me.
Classic.
Yeah. And I was just I look back on it now, it's quite funny, but at the time I was really stressed, probably hadn't had any sleep for 3 years. And she's please go to bed, I need grown-up time now. And the radio was on, and I heard someone on the radio say Jeremy Corbyn just got on the ballot paper and might be leader of the Labour Party. And I thought, oh, who's that guy? That sounds really familiar. Now a household name.
But before, none of us knew about it.
No, but the name did ring a bell. And I started thinking, yeah, I do remember like growing up in the 80s here. My mum was really involved in the anti-apartheid movement, the ANC, and we went to all these demonstrations, and like my family were political exiles here.
Okay.
My dad was a prisoner of conscience, and so like he was in prison in Malaysia, and we did a lot of like campaigning here during the 80s to get him released and stuff. So I kind of like remember seeing these kind of stalwarts of our movement. And I kind of mentioned it to Mum that night when the kids had finally gone to bed. And I was like, who's this Jeremy guy? And she was just like, seriously?
Do you not remember it?
You are no child of mine. And then like, who are you? She does think I'm a bit bougie, to be fair. And so like she came over the next day with this box, and it had all the paperwork from when she was campaigning for my dad's release from prison. And she opened the box and she pulled out all these like papers everywhere, and she pulled out a letter calling for my dad's release from prison, signed Jeremy Corbyn. And honestly, like every time I think like, it just kind of like sends shivers down my back, just kind of retelling the story. And at the time, it was just a bit of a light bulb moment. It just suddenly felt, oh, maybe British politics could open up to someone like me.
And it won't like entirely go down the bin.
Well, I guess my experience of party politics up until that point felt, I don't know, how do I put it? There's no like diplomatic way of putting it.
Oh, don't
really.
say it diplomatically.
Well, pale, male and stale,
yeah,
to be precise. And, you know, putting the kids to bed on a Thursday night and going down to a meeting. Like first you have to find childcare, and then it's 7 o'clock, and it's like in the middle of tea time and bedtime. It's just like really inaccessible spaces.
Yeah, because you kind of want to spend that time with your kids, don't you? Like,
Yeah.
You've worked all day, and this is the only time that you get to see them.
And so I just didn't really participate, apart from voting. So I kind of thought, right, well, how do I get involved? And like my upbringing was quite political. So both my parents are activists in Malaysia, and so like my childhood was very much kind of like baby on hip, going up into the rubber estates in Malaysia and organising workers, and like there would be aunts and uncles that we in Asian culture we call anyone who's older an aunt or uncle, or you'll get clipped on the ear. So like we'd be passed around, and there would be food, and there'd be kind of like, it was very intergenerational. And we'd just be talking and organising. And, I was learning trade union songs before I knew Disney ones. So those were my bedtime
That is the best
songs.
way, isn't it?
Was Union Maid and like got Pete Seeger, basically.
That's so cool.
And I think those are the spaces that I always try to gravitate towards because that's what I know and feel most familiar and comfortable in. So I went along to, a friend of mine was starting Momentum Latinx, and they were having an open, what do you call it? Launch event, that's right.
A launch event.
So a friend of mine was launching Momentum Latinx and invited me along, and I have to be honest, I actually only went along because his mum makes really good empanadas and he's a really amazing DJ, so I was basically going for the food and the music.
But you know what, that's a really good thing for activists to learn and understand, is that those kind of environments, if people come for the food and they stay for the politics,
Exactly.
you've won. You know what I mean?
That's ideal.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I got there, it was just full of people, so much energy in the space, and there were children running around, and there was a table out, and the children were all making these kind of protest placards and stuff. And then when Jeremy came in, the children all went marching up with their placards that said various things, and it was just so lovely. And then this guy walked in. He was quite tall, South Asian, he looked Tamil, and he had kind of like long hair with prayer beads, and he had this like giant-sized cricket bag on his back, and he just looked so weird. And he won't mind me saying this because he's one of my best friends now. He knows this. He knows this bit of the story. And he came in and he started talking about momentum arts and media. And so I have a background in, like, I studied architecture and I'm like in the creative industry. And like I thought, oh wow, like art, politics, I'm all over that.
Yes.
So I went and talked to him. A few days later we were having coffee, and a few days up, you know, a week after that, I was in the kind of Momentum Central office talking about politics and like how we create these welcoming spaces, and the World Transform festivals, like all these kind of conversations are happening and evolving. And I was there with, I brought a friend of mine along called Jessie, who is also a single mum, and we were talking about actually like it's quite difficult for us because we don't have the time that a lot of the volunteers did, and we have to kind of drag our kids along to everything. And you know, and I jokingly said, oh, we should start Momentum Kids. It was honestly, it was just a joke. And Adam Clark, who's one of the founders of Momentum, actually was like, stuck his head round the door and went, you should totally do that. We're like, okay, let's do it. So we did. We founded Momentum Kids. And like the idea behind it was very much about organising in communities, kind of inspired by the Black Panthers and breakfast clubs, like going into communities, talking to parents, to mothers, to carers, to grandparents who look after their children, you know, bringing food along, like that was the kind of idea that we really wanted to create, and knowing that these things take time and it takes trust building.
Can you say a bit more about the Black Panthers Breakfast Club for those who don't know?
I think the idea was very much about how to go into communities and meet people where they're at, and without talking about political education, you're doing political education. It's kind of like through action and organising, rather than like this top-down kind of, we're going to come and we're going to do a seminar on Socialism 101.
Right.
And I always felt like in the areas where I grew up in, you know, people were surviving, and there isn't, like, you can't, that's not going to really connect with people.
There's no extra time for it.
Yeah. And even like, despite the fact that I'm involved in the World Transform Festival, if someone came to me and said, would you like to come to my workshop on Socialism 101? I'd probably go, not really.
Even though you're involved. So imagine someone who's like, who doesn't know anything about it.
Because it's just not how I learn.
Yeah.
You know, I learn through talking, and I learn through music and art and film and dancing and food, and through a lot of food, and through activity, and like that isn't something that I could necessarily connect with. But I guess that was 2016, and between now and then there was so much going on, and I think like there wasn't really the space to kind of do the community organising that we needed to do to create those really important spaces. The spaces where we could go into communities and really, really organise with young mums, with single mums, to kind of like, in my head I imagine this like toddler group with kind of kids running around and mums sitting around talking about, you know, issues that really matter to us and how that links to politics and what we can do, and looking at building leadership. Like, there are so many incredible people all over the country who have been like so disenfranchised from politics, decades and decades of austerity, and kind of disillusioned.
But who would be great leaders?
Who would be amazing leaders. And those are really the kind of people that we need to transform politics and the country. But I think I understand now with the years in between, and now that I'm turning 40, that gives me extra wisdom.
Exactly.
Obviously.
The wisdom.
That actually takes time, and the urgency of the potential of being in power doesn't really allow for the space to actually go in and do that trust
Oh,
building and that
absolutely.
relationship building.
Absolutely. I remember you saying when we talked about this for the first time that your parents, when they were doing this kind of community organizing, they were thinking about the long term. You know, they weren't thinking about, okay, what's our next action, etc. Even though they were obviously trying to go forward with it.
Mhm.
But they were thinking like, how do we raise people to be political and how
Yeah,
do we raise them to,
absolutely.
like,
Yeah, so they were going in to organise with workers who might not necessarily have finished school, who wouldn't have had a formal education, maybe couldn't read, you know, they didn't know necessarily what the conditions were when they went in. So they were going in and they were talking and like organising with them and saying, you know, you can form a trade union, for example, and that this is what a trade union is, and we can organise together for your collective rights, and we can take this to your work and, you know, get protection for when you're pregnant from toxic chemicals, or, you know, there's like a whole range of things that they were doing. And, you know, that maybe years down the line, those same people would be in my mum and dad's front room then discussing the Communist Manifesto. But you have to meet people somewhere and like go on a journey together.
Yes.
Otherwise, you know, Marxism can be quite alienating.
It is. Like, a lot of people don't get it, that like, yeah, it's a lot of it is quite inaccessible, and also like learning through theory isn't necessarily the best way to learn. Like, I know that's how I was taught it, obviously, because, you know, went to university, studied politics, blah blah, but the most that I learned about how to change the world was actually through action. And it always is, you know,
and also the theory needs to evolve with the community.
Yes.
Rather than be imposed on.
Oh, absolutely.
Which was always the intention. And not that I'm, you know, necessarily against the study of it. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
But it's more about how we kind of go into places, bring people together, and like go on that journey together. Maybe like curate those syllabuses together. And it might be a workshop, it might be art, it might be a drama exercise, it might be through poetry.
Sorry, I just love this. We are going to attempt the winged eyeliner.
Okay.
Ooh. I wanna know more about like the momentum kids, the world transformed and momentum kids, and like how you're organizing it, and then, you know, kind of the absences or like the lacks that you have seen, because childcare isn't like a new thing in politics, right? But I think there have been a lot of letdowns when it comes to how activists consider childcare and how activists look at carers, especially.
Yeah, I think we tend to like lean towards what we know, particularly when you're rushing around trying to organise a festival, or when we kind of like really felt the urgency of we might be in government, how do we prepare for government? Like, we were in a very particular moment or accident in time.
Close your eyes.
And I think actually the kind of opportunity, when I was like talking about what it felt to be a young child in those spaces, my learning was through being in them.
Yeah.
And children are like,
Don't open yours.
no!
It's fine. I can fix it.
Can I open it now?
No, don't have it!
Okay.
No, sorry, it has to be. But it is looking good for now. Looking very good for now. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you saying? I think I terrified you. I'm so sorry.
I don't know anymore. So 2016,
Yes.
Momentum Kids was accidentally born, and we had this idea of what we wanted to do, and then got very much caught up in the rush of the whole kind of
Elections,
elections, leadership contests, you know, the potential of being in a space where we were preparing for government, and I was very much focused on the world transformed at this point, and so we were looking at how we kind of create spaces within the festival that were open to children and to mums.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I think we did lean into what we knew, which is great creches. And they were. Although, you know, one of my disappointments was that actually I really wanted to have children in the room rather than them being excluded from the political space.
Yes.
You know, so if a mum wanted to breastfeed, there were people around, you know, where, you know, she could breastfeed and the child could run around afterwards. Or if you wanted to leave your child in a creche, you could do that too, because that's your choice and anything's good.
We're not judging mums.
We are not judging at all. I can go either way with my children. Sometimes I just want them to be in another room.
Yeah.
But we also kind of had loads of really exciting things for children to do. So we had self-defense classes. We had jiu-jitsu.
That's so cool.
And we had...
all of it was free, and like all of it was just accessible.
Yeah, we had Michael Rosen doing poetry readings in the creche.
Aww.
And, you know, loads of kind of art and painting and drama for them to get into. And it was just really lovely. You know, you could see in the kind of like main festival hall, like children sitting down reading a book or running about. There was someone on roller skates, which was potentially a little bit unsafe. We kind of like cobbled everything together. And that was really lovely. And we started, you know, as the festival progressed over the years, having sessions on radical childcare and what that could mean. But again, there was just, I think there's like that really amazing opportunity now to go back to the ethos of why we started it. And to kind of really, really look at our political spaces in a different way, because I think we need to bring children up within our movement rather than see them as an add-on. And we seem to have, you know, children tend to get politicised perhaps at university when they join a student union or they're doing something. Amazingly now that, you know, a lot of young people are getting politicised through the climate strikes.
Yes.
And that's fantastic to see.
Yes.
But again, like, wanting to take the young people involved in the Friday climate strikes and like bring them into the whole climate movement, and like part of the decision making, part of the participatory policy making around the Green New Deal. Like, let's actually listen to what kids have to say. Like, for example, when I'm asked to speak at an event, I tend to always ask my kids what they think, because they just know stuff that I don't. And I was asked to do a talk about the Green New Deal, and I was very new to kind of climate activism at the time, and I said, you know, what do you think about, you know, what do you learn at school about the environment and climate? And they kind of told me all the usual stuff about, you know, we have to turn the lights off and we have to recycle, and there's like plastic in the sea, and just, you know, it was very much about personal responsibility. And so... yeah, that's how I got taught in school as well. Yeah. And so I kind of said, you know, you do realise that like, most of the pollution come from a very small... and I kind of like tried not to get into too much data and percentages. Yeah. Like, comes from a small group of polluting corporations rather than, you know, us with our lights and our recycling. She said, you know that Pop the Weasel game, Mum? And I thought, yeah. And she said, well, the corporate polluting companies are like the weasel, and then they've got this board with holes in, and they pop up, and we have to get the mallet and we have to like hammer them back down, and then they pop up again somewhere else, and then you have to get the mallet and you have to like hammer them back down again. Oh, that is so true. I know. And I was like, okay, so the weasels are the company. The board, who's the board? Just like, you know, like government and stuff. It's like, okay. And who's the mallet? And she looked at me as if I was like really stupid. I get this look from my daughter a lot. Like, you're such an idiot. She's like, well, we are. I was like, that's fantastic. Like, she got it straight away, and I didn't really need to explain much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they learn. You know, they're such sponges.
Mm-hmm.
We learn from them, they learn from us, and you don't have to wait until you're in a student union bar
Exactly.
to learn about politics. You know, you can do it from a really young age. And learning about politics is learning about organising and how we communicate with each other. And let's have them in the room all the time.
It's also like so much easier for mums just to like have their kids in the room and, you know, not have to worry. Because like, I know, you know, when, like my experience of trying to orchestrate free childcare was with the Rent Strike conference 2 years ago. And, you know, we just kind of thought, oh, yeah, it's great because like mums will be able to like drop their kids off and like do the adult stuff. And so, you know, we had like a couple of games for them and like drawing and stuff. And then there was a mum who came by and she was like, if you really want to organize childcare, remember that parents will think about their kids first before they think of themselves. Mm-hmm. So you have to up your game basically, and you have to think about the parents a lot more than just, well, you have to think about children a lot more than just burdens, because they're not, like, they're really, really helpful to movements, and they're really, like, they make movements so much more joyful and, like, you know, example worthy, and yeah.
But it also changes the outcome of the decisions and the discussions that are made, which then, you know, has a direct outcome on what the action is, for example, or how the policy is developed, if you take that any further and deeper. So I think, you know, it's not just about making it accessible for mums and carers. It's also about actually bringing people who are most impacted by these policies
into the room.
But also we want people to come back. And I think as movement organisers, we also need to always be aware of not being gatekeepers, building leadership, and always making sure that there is this kind of like beautiful growth and nurturing as we go along.
Yes.
And we do that by creating these kind of spaces, because there's always people to come up. And you're talking about, you said earlier about, you know, parents will put their children first. And part of that is also, I need some self-care, I need some time, and it's completely unsustainable for us as activists to just be like constantly on the go.
Exactly.
And particularly when you're a single mum, it's absolutely exhausting. And so I just think actually like having these spaces mean that as young people grow up, they are ready to take
on some of the work. Just I don't
have it.
I don't want
to. You're so much better than I am at doing this.
I don't believe that for a second.
But there's also this like really amazing missing link, like the magic that happens for me, where you have like radical policy, and then you have this amazing activist movement that grows. But then there's something in between, the participatory bit. And so I was at this event, we were doing an event for the Green Industrial Revolution, which was like the Green, you know, the Labour Party's version of the Green New Deal. And there was a young girl there, her name was Tara, who was in Blackpool. She was maybe about 18-ish, just finished her A-levels, about to go to university, young woman of colour, and, you know, very, very new to political spaces, had never kind of been to anything like this before. And she did a roundtable event with the fracking nanas. They were there as well. And she was talking about how, you know, she used to pass them on the way to school, and she one day stopped to talk to them. And she did this feedback from her roundtable, and you know, with Jeremy and like the local candidate and like all these grown-ups in the room. And I thought, gosh, she's really interesting. So we started talking, and I met up with her a few times. And as the months grew, and she did kind of like community organising training and leadership training, and we kind of like, she'd been in spaces where we were doing participatory policy making, and we were really talking about like, what does the Green New Deal, what does climate policy actually mean here to workers who are workers from a nuclear power plant sitting on tables with anti-fracking campaigners,
Yes.
and like let's have these conversations
Yes.
and really talk about what is a green job? Are they good green unionized jobs? Like let's have these conversations. And so she was like part of this as we were developing it. And like 6 months, 9 months down the line, she was doing roundtable events with Naomi Klein and, you know, Rebecca Long Bailey and Jeremy, and panel discussions with John McDonnell. And like, you know, she was doing, during the election, she was doing interviews for Vice magazine. She just came alive. And honestly, I really hope, and I kind of feel like it's one of my life ambitions to see this young woman in Parliament, because
Yes.
she's absolutely incredible. And that's the kind of like, if you open your spaces up, these are the people that rise.
Exactly. Oh, that's such a beautiful story.
I love her.
Shout out to you, Tara.
Tara.
We are done with the look.
Thank you.
Oh my god,
Oh
that's
my
so
God.
gorgeous! If you want, you can look in the mirror.
Okay,
Right over
I'm
there.
a bit nervous to see.
Oh wow! How did you do those eyes? Do you like it? I feel like I need to go out now.
You do. I kind of overlined your lips, which means that they look bigger than they are. So it like, it's always, when I overline my lips, I'm just like, for 5 minutes, like, what does this look like? Why? But an hour down the line, you will be very happy that
Okay,
they
I'll get
overlined.
used to mine.
Yes, the pouty lips. But oh my god,
I
I
like the pout.
love
Thank
the eyes.
you.
Oh,
That was
thank
so cool.
you so much for coming on my channel. You are just like amazing and like very
So kind.
wise, and just, yeah, you have so much to say, and
It's
I'm
a
so
40
glad.
thing, obviously.
Yes, it's a 40 thing, isn't it? But yeah, like you've just so many amazing and interesting things to say, and every single person who is organizing should listen to you and like really aim to create these spaces and these kind of worlds where like everyone can inhabit them, because we will have such better actions and like outcomes and policies, as you say, and like amazing leaders for tomorrow.
Sounds great. Let's
Yes!
do it.
So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and comment down below any questions you have for Natasha. She'll be very happy to answer them. Any questions on the look, just ask me. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can see more amazing people like her. Yay! Bye, Combabe! Bye, bye.